Welcome. I'm gonna kick off, and perhaps other people will join us shortly. But welcome everyone to tonight's discussion on International Day for People with Disabilities, hosted by the Co-operative Party's Disability Network. My name is Ben Cooper, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Disability Network. This discussion will focus on this year's theme for the day: not all disabilities are visible. We, of course, gather virtually in the middle of a pandemic which has disproportionately affected disabled people. We cannot avoid talking about the devastating human toll it has had, the lives lost, the support pulled away, and the fear and anxiety experienced. And as we look to rebuild our country, we have to ensure that disabled voices are at the heart of change so that communities are more accessible for everyone. Our values as a party of equality, empowerment and cooperation are vital to ensure we finally tackle those barriers faced by disabled people. This makes International Day for People with Disabilities so important. The theme of not all disabilities are visible aims to raise awareness and understanding of disabilities that are not immediately apparent. It reminds us of the need to build a society that works for all people living with a disability, whether visible or invisible. So tonight's event is split into two. The first half will be a panel discussion with a Q&A, and the second half will open up to Co-operative Party Disability Network members to talk about the issues you feel the network needs to focus on. So I'm delighted to introduce our panel for tonight. Firstly, we have Teresa Vaughan, Secretary of the Co-operative Party Disability Network, who will be chairing tonight's panel. Unfortunately, the network's other co-chair, Cheryl Barrett, is unable to make it tonight, and we pass on our best wishes to her. But Teresa will be joined by Joe Watkinson, who is also a member of the Disability Network Steering Committee and Disability Awareness Campaigner, Fran Springfield, who is on the advisory board for the Chronic Illness Inclusion Project and co-chair of Disability Labour, Tom Coleman from the Autism Services and Solutions Co-op, and Robert Mooney, who is the former president of Community the Union and current chair of its National League of Blind and Disabled section, as well as sitting on the General Council of the Scottish Trade Union Congress. Now, before I hand over to Teresa to chair this discussion, I've been told that I need to share a few technical things in terms of running this meeting via Zoom. So firstly, this Zoom call and discussion is being recorded. Many of our members cannot access it live, so we'll be making it available to view via the Co-op Party's YouTube channel. Therefore, if you don't want your image to be seen, please switch your camera off and go to audio only. To make the content of this call clearer, you have been muted. Only those speaking will be shown on the screen or have sound enabled. Following the presentation, we will hold a Q&A session. So while participants are speaking, you may want to come up with questions. There are three ways that you can ask a question. Firstly, you can click on the icon labelled participant at the bottom centre of your PC or phone screen. Then click the button labelled raised hand. Your digital hand will be raised so that we are aware of your question. You can also post your question in the chat box, which is being monitored, or you can send it to events@party.coop, that's COOP, which is being monitored by my colleague Izzy. When it's your turn to ask a question, Teresa will introduce you and you will be unmuted. Finally, the Co-operative Party believes that our cooperative values should be reflected in our actions as well as our policies. We want all members on our event to feel safe, welcome and respected in our party. So please ensure you respect this when making your contributions today. So it's now time for me to pass over to Teresa and our fantastic speakers. Teresa, over to you.
Thank you very much. Right, well, we have our first speaker, who is Joe Watkinson. Would you like to introduce yourself, Joe, and tell us a little bit about why we invited you?
And good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Joe Watkinson, as you've just been told, but I'm also a member of the Co-op Disability Network, which was elected. I was elected this year with a fellow 12 members. I am also a Labour Party member as well as a GMB activist, and I wanted to talk this evening about some general issues, obviously, of disability, as well as obviously invisible disabilities. But I would also argue that every disabled person is invisible in some parts, in all parts of our society, and that at times we can all be invisible. And that is a part of society and the social constructs which are giving us the inability to actually be valued members of our communities, and the barriers that they place, that government as well as that society that we live in put on us. Obviously, we have obviously physical disabilities, but we also have invisible disabilities, which obviously, and we have to also accept that they also bring up their own challenges with them, and that we obviously have that as an element which obviously causes as a community issues. In my experience, hidden disabilities have been overlooked completely. They are underplayed and prevent us getting access to support and which we're entitled to. People make assumptions and judgments on our experiences about us, which have no relevance in what their judgments are, but they assume that we can't do things when we actually can. I know in the past I've been told that I was lazy, or that I'm a benefit fraud because I have a hidden disability, because they don't understand it. And I think the biggest issue is that education around disability is a massive issue in communities and in workplaces. Obviously, we need to ensure that employers, public service workers and policymakers all understand disability. And we need to understand how it affects us as well. And obviously the only way that we can do that is by having disabled voices at the top table. Part of what I want to talk about this evening is about the issue around COVID. We've all been living through it. Every one of us has been living through long COVID. And 1.6 million people have had COVID. But obviously a large number of those have got potentially something called long COVID. And long COVID is potentially going to be a very big, shall we say, increasing of the numbers of people with invisible disabilities. And so we need to ensure that they are looked after in workplaces as much as we need to be looked after, but we also need to be ensuring that new people who are going to be dealing with disabilities coming up are also there as well. I also want to obviously say that through COVID, we've obviously seen some amazing things happen through our societies and communities across the board. But we've also seen some really, really, really negative things, such as people being verbally assaulted for putting their masks on. But the fact is, I don't have to wear a mask. I have anxiety, and actually, I feel that I have to wear it because of people saying that, oh, you should be wearing it, you should be wearing it. And I feel that I have to, even though I don't have to by the law. And the law doesn't seem to be protecting us in that way. I really feel that it doesn't seem to protect us, even though it does legally. But through the COVID crisis, I've also seen some very other things, such as I live with my brother. He has spina bifida. He's a wheelchair user. And I'm also a carer with a disability. And Jake, my brother, he went shopping with me, and we were meant to be 6 feet apart, as we all were through this whole crisis. And one member of the general public decided to lean over him, totally ignoring the fact that he was here. And that is absolutely outrageous in my opinion. So social distancing wasn't a thing to anyone, if you have disabled, especially if you're disabled, to the fact that they just not there, they're invisible. I also, through the whole crisis, and I'm sure that many of you can understand this, I struggled to get access to supermarkets with my brother as a carer, when certain supermarkets wouldn't allow you to get access to the supermarkets with another person. And they just use the excuse, well, we can help him, we can do it. no, you can't. There's certain needs that certain disabled people need you to do without any other thing else. And they just didn't listen, they didn't care. And that's a problem that I've seen throughout COVID, that a lot of places just didn't care, even though we have seen some amazing things of community engagement. There's been a lot of things that people just didn't care. They followed the rules, what they thought was the right rules, even though they was discriminating against us. But as I said, I'm a carer for my brother. I also have my invisible disabilities, such as fibromyalgia and dyslexia and things like anxiety and OCD. But as an unpaid carer, I'm more likely, as a member of that community supporting disabled people, more likely to have an invisible disability, such as disabled people are as well, to have physical and mental health being worse off by 71%. And that 84% of carers feel stressed at times, and about nearly 80% of people feel more anxious. Well, that was before COVID. I'm assuming those numbers are much higher now, but those are real big issues that I think need to be looked at. And I think that the co-op can have a place to help support carers and the disabled community by potentially setting up co-op care structures to help people in those kind of backgrounds. Where I've also felt some, in my own personal life, I felt that I have felt invisible has been at work. Just before COVID in December last year, I lost my job through ill health. But before that, I was at work for 5 years, and I learned in that period of time that I had a disability of fibromyalgia. And trying to educate my work to understand disability was an absolute nightmare. And I'm sure that a lot of people can understand that. But I also, before I had fibromyalgia, I had dyslexia. And dyslexia obviously affects my reading and affects my obviously ability to sometimes get the right word in my head, and sometimes like that, and obviously be able to write things down. And that can also affect my work productivity if I don't have the right things in place to help me out. And it took 6 months for my company, which is a FTSE 100 company, to multi-billion-pound company, and it took them 6 months to get the appropriate things in place to allow me to actually do my job properly. But in that period of time, I was given written notes, warnings that I wasn't able to actually fulfill my role. The moment that I actually fulfilled my role, the moment I received my equipment, shall I say, was the moment that I actually was able to perform my role properly, and I was able to then be what they seemed a productive member of the team, shall I say. But in that time, obviously, it took them 6 months to find it, and obviously, I felt at times that I was being overlooked by my company for promotion. And it took them a long time to obviously get things sorted. I helped teach members of staff which were being promoted before me. And obviously those are relatively things which I think happen all the time. I think over that period of time, obviously, I was losing out on money because I had to reduce my income, but obviously, and my hours at work. But those are things which are quite common for an awful lot of disabled people. Workplaces are not flexible in their work structures. Hopefully, COVID will change that. But the TUC have, let's go on to side point right now, but the TUC have obviously set up a new campaign to obviously raise awareness between obviously disabled pay gap, which I don't know if a lot of people know, but is actually about £3,800 difference on average that people are actually losing out on pay. And that, I think, is an absolute horrendous thing that we need to be going through. But also a part of the problem is that 20% of companies, which this survey was taken during the pandemic, that 20% of employers would not likely hire disabled people. That's a massive issue that we're having. And that obviously anyone with a disability of any sort, even if it's visible or invisible, is going to struggle. So obviously, those are massive issues that obviously that we're facing as a co-op, as a disabled community, and that's a part of what I am. I raise awareness of disability, and obviously we, as a part of that campaign aspects, I want to work with the co-op to actually help raise awareness of disability issues within our own party and obviously national. And obviously, I do think that the co-op have done some amazing things. Look, we've got this group. We've got this group now. We're going to be moving forward with disabilities, and we're going to be more visible within the co-op party. But I also hope that obviously we can improve on this structure now, and obviously make disabled people far more visible, regardless if it's invisible or invisible disabilities, because we're all should be visible within our own party. And I'm going to leave it there, I think. And I think I'm going to obviously allow the other speakers to speak. And obviously, I would like to thank you very much for obviously allowing me to speak tonight. And obviously, thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. Most interesting. I would like to bring in Fran Springfield. Are you still there, Fran?
Yeah, I am indeed, Teresa.
Wonderful. You are from the Chronic Illness Inclusion Project. Have I got that right?
Yes, you have.
Right, I will leave you to explain what you do and what it's about. I've heard about it, but I know nothing about it. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay, Teresa, thank you. And thank you everybody else for coming and listening to our event this evening. The Chronic Illness Inclusion Project is a voice for disabled people who have energy limiting chronic illness, energy impairment and chronic pain. We're currently evolving from a disability-led research project under the DRILL programme to become an independent user-led organisation with about 1,500 supporters. So we represent a very large group of disabled people. 1 in 3 disabled people in the UK reports impairment of stamina, breathing or fatigue, according to the government disability data. And as our last speaker said, this sadly looks set to grow with the emergence of long COVID, because fatigue has been reported as the most prevalent symptom of long COVID. Chronic Illness Inclusion Project exists to challenge the negative perceptions towards people with chronic illness and to promote our rights as disabled people, especially by working alongside other disabled people's organisations. The terms energy limiting chronic illness and energy impairment grew out of participatory research. We held quite a number of in-depth focus group discussions, and we collected survey responses from over 2,000 people living with chronic illness. 2 of our main findings were that fatigue or energy limitation is the most restricting feature for a broad range of chronic illnesses, followed by. And the other thing was that the existing language of impairment and disability doesn't always convey that experience. Also, the term fatigue actually can erase our experience of impairment, because in medicine, fatigue is hard to pin down with lab findings. And of course, for normal people, it's something that they get over very quickly, because maybe it's just equated with feeling tired and not with a disability. Energy impairment gets across the idea that this is not just an unpleasant sensation that you can push through. Participants to our survey said that fatigue is the thing that disables me the most. And I would absolutely agree with that as somebody who's got both visible and invisible disabilities. And it's certainly something that few people think of as a disability. We think the terms energy limiting chronic illness and energy impairment are important for identifying ourselves as disabled people and promoting our rights as disabled people to get things like the reasonable adjustments that the last speaker was talking about. Our research has been very rooted in the social model of disability. While energy impairment itself can be very debilitating, we were looking at what were the unnecessary barriers and restrictions imposed by society that actually cause a lot of our disadvantage and exclusion. People with energy limiting chronic illness face many of the same barriers as other disabled people. For example, those of us who use wheelchairs are excluded quite often in inaccessible environments and transport. But we also face a form of oppression that's related to disbelief. And that, for many of us, is something that is very, very traumatic. Disbelief of our experiences of energy impairment or pain. We can encounter that belief in multiple settings. For some people, it's starting within the GP's consulting room, when standard blood tests don't reveal any pathology. Many of us do have conditions that are hard to diagnose, taking years on average, or conditions that are contested within the medical profession, or wrongly assumed to be psychosomatic. We are bonded by that experience of having the testimony of our bodies dismissed and disbelieved. But even when there is an explanation for our energy impairment, we are disbelieved. My own experience of this has been particularly traumatic. I have a lung function problem, which means that I've only now got 40% lung function left following some chemotherapy, which went wrong. And at one point, I had a social worker who demanded my GP referred me into a whole cycle of medical appointments, which only reinforced the fact that I couldn't have a lung transplant, which she believed would solve all my problems and then I didn't need social care. It was utterly, utterly horrendous going through that. I'm a nurse by background, and I'd already had that conversation with a consultant months, if not years before, and knew that that was never going to be an option for me. And yet I was once again pushed into that traumatic system and knowing what the outcome would be. As our last speaker talked, we also encountered disbelief amongst employers, colleagues, and sometimes amongst close family and friends. And of course, within the benefits system that's so geared up to disbelieving any disabled person, whether it's on a PIP form or when you're going through a work capacity assessment. Because this disbelief is so rooted in medical systems and its approach to so-called medically unexplained symptoms and rooted in our assessment systems for benefits. We call this systemic disbelief. We believe that this systemic disbelief is a particularly cruel form of ableism. But there's one thing to remember. Many people with energy limiting chronic illness don't identify as disabled. And again, as the last speaker said, there are going to be many, many more of us because people with long COVID. And that will, I was talking to somebody quite recently who was diagnosed with COVID back in March last year. And she is now profoundly disabled. She needs to use a wheelchair. She can't go back to work. And yet she still doesn't really see herself as being disabled. And I think for some people, that's because it's a recently acquired chronic illness and that their focus wants to be on medical treatment and recovery. People are not always ready to accept a disability identity because maybe that means they give up hope of getting their life back. And this systemic disbelief comes with a kind of gatekeeping in society of who and who is not a genuine disabled person. So there's a whole range of issues there which face so many of us as we go about our daily lives. Some of the things that the first speaker talked about in terms of not being believed, being belittled, being dismissed, all of those things are things that we still struggle with, and why our chronic illness inclusion project came into existence to try and change some of those misconceptions and I'm happy to answer further questions later on. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Fran. Our next speaker is Tom Coleman, who's a manager of Autism Services and Solutions. Are you ready, Tom?
Yes, hello there.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah, so I'm a bit nervous at the moment, so I'm just going to have a quick conversation. My sort of general background is as I've got autism, and for years and years I struggled with getting employment and discrimination against people and finding it very hard with getting a job. You know, I had a lot of abuse from people within companies, some of it being quite outrageous by sort of a legal and you know, moral point of view. So I decided that I really wanted to try and do something to help people with autism to try and get skills and confidence to try and get work. It's very difficult because, you know, the government is sort of, there are so many obstacles for people being accepted in the workplace with, for example, a social side of it. They can't fit in with a team situation, or they have high level anxiety problems or sensory overloads with what's going on and meltdowns with the atmosphere that they're working in. There's institutional discrimination as well, not directly, but because of people just lack of understanding. So a group of us decided to kind of get together as a peer group and support each other all and try and tap into the skills that people have got, rather than just turn around and say, you know, they can't do this, or they've got autism so they can't do that. And I just tried to fight against it to try and give people a possibility to utilize their skills, to kind of give them the confidence that they are an important member of society, and they can, and they've got skills that are useful to other people. For example, a lot of people with autism find it very difficult to thrive in an educational situation because of the class situation, and they don't work very well as part of a team. They need to be doing things on their own, to be doing it their way. And a lot of the employers will be trying, or neurotypical people, that's people that haven't got autism, will be saying, for example, you do it our way, and if you don't fit into the way that we do things here, then we can't adapt to your needs. And so only around about 16% of people with autism are in full-time employment, and the government have sort of more or less kind of thrown everybody on the scrap heap for sort of a whole lifetime of being on benefits, because they just haven't got the awareness or the facilities or the resources to try and enable people to tap into their skills and utilize them. So, you know, our scheme is to kind of, we've got some computer systems where people can access certain software and learn skills like programming. We've got someone that was who wrote the operating system for the Sinclair QL in the 80s, and he can help people with skills like programming. We've got someone that does Android apps. We've got somebody that does, you know, we got a facility place where we repair laptop motherboards. We just try and get people here with this to tap into their skills and really try and, you know, give them the opportunity to. And also we try and help socially as well by running a website called autismfriendship.com and things like that, so we can enable them to sort of meet people and build up their social skills. It's a constant battle. I suffer from a great lot of anxiety and depression myself, so it's been really difficult. I've had massive, you know, very severe depression because I've felt discriminated against, and people have been so abusive to me. Even people walking down the street have been abusive when I've had meltdowns and things, which has been really upsetting. And and if you sort of take on board everything that other people say, you just wouldn't go out the house, because it's very, you know, it's very upsetting. And if you take things personally, and, you know, you can, because of your social problems with maybe with communicating or understanding people, you can misread things or misunderstand what they're saying to you and take things very personally and get very upset by it. And I think that takes up a massive amount of energy, and because of your dealing, you're not filtering out any of the problems, any of the things that are going on around you, all the noises, all the people, you're trying to understand the world around you. You're getting physically exhausted as well as mentally exhausted, which is absolutely, takes off a good amount of your time. So yeah, we're trying to help people work if they can't go into a business on a freelance basis, so that, for example, we're working on a website, and I'll sort of update you some links in, when we've in the future, but we're trying to sort of enable people to work on a freelance basis, or for people to come to them and say, well, look, can you do this work for us on a so that they don't have to go into an office, or they don't have to work in a team situation and exacerbate their anxiety levels, and just basically sort of keep on with the awareness side of things, really, just to try and educate people, because there's, rather than this kind of attitude where people can't do things, we want to say, well, look, yes, they have got problems where maybe they can't communicate, and you might think, they're not on the same wavelength as you, but there are a lot of skills and abilities that you're not appreciating, and I want to try and promote that. So that's all I've got to say, really, but thank you for having me on here.
You are more than welcome, Tom. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You have spoke volumes. I've been nodding and agreeing with you all the way through. But we will come back to you when we've got, we're going to hear from Robert Mooney, who has probably sneaked off to go and watch football somewhere. Hey there, Robert. Robert.
Yep, sorry, I just had to unmute myself.
All right, I thought you'd sneaked off to watch football.
No, no, I've not ran away yet. I'm still here. Thank you very much.
You had me worried there. Right, you have your 15 minutes of fame, young man.
My name's Robert Mooney, and I've been involved with the trade union movement for more years than I would like to remember, and I've held nearly every position you could imagine within the trade union movement. I've been a shop steward, been health and safety rep, I've been the branch secretary, I've been on the national executive in my union, I've been president and then a trustee of community trade union. I've also held the disability seat in the General Council at STUC and the General Federation of Trade Unions. I'm also a Glasgow City Councillor. And on the 17th of November, the STUC had their conference. And on the 18th, the General Council met to elect the Vice President and President of the STUC. And you become Vice President or President by your length of service in the General Council. So I'd been there for 17 years. It was my turn. But because my own trade union, another trade union, and the STUC had a dispute for 2 years, my union never put me forward for it. So I would have been the first disabled person in 123 years to be the president of the STUC, and unfortunately the trade union movement let us down. So we don't always get it right. And I think, and personally, it would have been a great honour to be the president of the STUC, but I would have been the first disabled person, and that opportunity, because it's a length of service in the STUC Dinner Council, that opportunity won't come round again for at least another 20 years, if at all. So I'm bitterly disappointed about that, and I just had to get that out of my system, that trade unions don't always get it right. But as far as being a councillor is concerned, I've been a councillor for 4 years now, and I absolutely love it. It was a natural progression from the trade union movement. But I deeply feel that some of the problems, or most of the problems that disabled people suffer in society, for instance, we were definitely the hardest hit during the austerity years, and it's been mentioned tonight as well that we're probably been the hardest hit during COVID, and I feel it's because we don't have enough disabled politicians. And I see it myself, even within the Labour group in Glasgow City Council. Disability is way down the list of priorities. And at times I feel it's like banging my head off a wall trying to get disabled issues to the fore. And I know the focus tonight is unseen disabilities and being registered blind. You wouldn't think that's something that's unseen because a blind person will either have a guide dog or a white stick, but that's not really how it works. And there's only 2% of people who are registered blind have actually no sight at all. There's another 2% who can see some sort of a light and shadow, and then it grades going up the way that people have differing levels of sight, and you become registered blind through a doctor, and he'll test you, and it depends on your acuity. So I remember at numerous times people have said to me, "You're not blind," which can be very, very upsetting at times, to say the least. And I remember trying to use the public toilet or the disabled toilet with a radar key in Glasgow Central Station and being told by one of the staff that I wasn't disabled, which I gave them some frank and comradely words of exchange, as you can probably imagine. But I've been involved with the trade unions for 40 years, and the biggest problem I've seen in that 40 years is the opportunities for employment. When I first joined the trade union movement many years ago, it was said that 50% of people with disabilities at working age were unemployed. And unfortunately today it's roughly the same. It's hardly moved in over 40 years. And there's many reasons for that. One of them being the awareness of employers on disability issues and the fear that employers have to take on a person with disabilities, but also the education system lets people with disabilities down. You're still twice as likely to leave school without any qualifications as your able-bodied peers if you have a disability. My own son, who is also registered blind, he was a procurator fiscal, which in England would be a Crown prosecution lawyer, but he now works as a criminal lawyer with the Home Office. But when he was 14, his first introduction to his careers officer, and his careers officer asked him what he would like to do, and he said, "I would like to be a lawyer." And his careers officer said, "I think you're aiming a little bit high. You should lower your scope a bit." So I think that's, my son always says that's what made him give him the determination to become a lawyer. And as I was saying earlier on about the politics and how low down they are, disability issues are within Glasgow City Council, but all local government, I would imagine. And I can understand, because during these days of massive cuts to local authorities, the budgets are strained and disability issues unfortunately get lost. And one of the battles I'm having just now as a Glasgow City Councillor is how inaccessible the city centre of Glasgow is for people with sight loss. They've introduced a new, they're calling it an avenue, which is an old street being changed into an avenue. It's got a double cycle path, but it's totally inaccessible for people with disabilities. There's bus stops, there's a central reservation with bus stops, there's the road into the other side, there's a cycle path, but you walk off the bus and right onto the cycle path, and there's nothing to tell you that you're going onto a cycle path. And you can do the same with the road. But you can actually walk right off the curb. There isn't a curb there, and you can walk right in front of the traffic. And I've had officers of the council up. I've raised it at full council meetings, and unfortunately nobody seems to be listening. And one of the main streets in Glasgow, which has many roads crossing it, and many crossings, and I don't know if most people know, but on the box on the pole at the crossing, there's a cone that rotates when the green man comes on, and a blind person can feel that's rotating. Well, there's 16 crossings, and it's probably the busiest street in Glasgow, and not one of them have got it. And the answer to the council is, well, we can't afford that. So for blind people, it's like playing Russian roulette trying to cross a road. It's absolutely ridiculous in the 21st century. And unfortunately, that happens in all phases of life for people with disabilities. And although we have moved on somewhat in the last 40 years, we still have a mountain to climb. And again, as far as employment is concerned, I know that the Citizens Advice have done a study recently about COVID and the effects on employment, and has said that they believe that 1 in 4 people with disabilities will lose their job because of COVID. And in a situation where disabled people are struggling to get employment as it is, it's tragic, and my heart breaks for young people, because I know that I've been lucky enough to work all my life and leave after 38 years with a pension. I know the importance that has and the security it gives you, but there's so many young people who don't have that. Well, thank you very much. That's me finished. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, I have 3 questions. And I think we'll start, this is for everybody. So we'll cut it down to maybe 2 or 3 minutes each for this one. It's quite an open question. As in, do the panel members think that the medical model of disability needs to be expanded to include the social model, as suggested by the World Health Organization? About disability is understood to arise from interaction between the person's health condition or impairment and the multitude of influencing factors in their environment. So who wants to go first? Go on then, Robert.
Thank you very much. I think it's actually a no-brainer. I think as most people who are on here will know about the social model of disability, and it's that society puts up barriers that cause people to disable people. And obviously access to buildings, and as I was speaking about earlier on, access to streets, access to employment. Society put up barriers against disabled people. Thank you.
Thank you. Fran?
Yes, I mean, again, I agree with the last speaker, absolutely, but I think we actually need to go further. One of the things that I've been looking at and I've been talking about when I go around to trade unions and other organisations doing disability awareness training and disability equality training is that I actually think we need to have a human rights model of disability. Disability rights at the end of the day are human rights. And I think if we put it into that context, it will actually make our case a great deal stronger. And I'm more than happy to talk more about that and show people a logo and all sorts of other things I've designed in relation to that, and looked at particularly six or eight bits of legislation that we need, including getting the United Nations Convention on the Human Rights for Disabled People enshrined into UK law. And I do think that's one really big campaign that all the disability organisations and trade unions need to unite about and really push to get that to happen.
Thank you. Joe?
Well, I'm going on back to 2 brilliant answers there, but yes, I think it's a very. I think we need to be in. Well, go down the line of adding it to the disability model. I think obviously society does make disabled people more disabled. I know that from having 3 different people in this household with 3 different kinds of disabilities, and different things affect us differently on a different basis, and like but then vice versa. That on the other hand, I've got the British Sign Language needs to be added to obviously make sure that we, because at the moment we're having reports from the government which people who need sign language aren't even being out there, so they're actually being made disabled by our national BBC, so because they can't get access to something which is in the way that we all getting access to it. So yes, I fully support the move to making the social model added to the disability part of it. So yes, I fully support that.
Righty-ho, thank you very much. You might as well stay there and answer this question first, and then we'll go back to Fran and Robert. So, will our public services ever be funded sufficiently to make autism and hidden disabilities into areas that are no longer mountains for the public to climb?
I hope so. Obviously, if as long as people vote for Labour and cooperative MPs, I hope so. I think that's the only way that we're going to get anything in the future. And I think we need to obviously get a socialist government, a social government in. It is the only way that we're because with the Tories in power, I don't think we will. And they have not proven anything at all that they have autism or hidden disabilities in their minds or in their even in their souls, if they even have a soul. To be honest, I would argue that they don't have a soul. But yeah, no, I think that I hope we can, but it's going to be an uphill battle. And it's going to, and I just hope that as a cooperative party, as well as the Labour Party, they can support the disabled community in getting the right support that they need. And I'm going to just leave it there.
Right. Okay. How about you, Fran? What's your answer to this one?
My answer is exactly the same as my colleague who just spoken. The only way we're going to get this is a Labour and cooperative government, and to have some socialism within the heart of government, because clearly it's not going to happen under the Tories, but it sure needs to happen.
Right. Is that it for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, Robert.
Yep, absolutely. I agree with my 2 colleagues. But in Scotland, unfortunately, we have a double whammy. The only way the local authorities will be properly funded is with a cooperative and Labour government. We have a double whammy with the SNP, and it amazes me how the SNP have been in power in Scotland for 13 years and have never taken responsibility for anything. In Glasgow, we had 4% cut, and our budget's been cut in the last 13 years by £600 million. Last year, we had to cut 4% off the budget. This year, we're having to cut 6% off the budget. The SNP point to Westminster and say it's their fault, but in fact, that proportionately, there's 4 times more cuts come from the Scottish government than come from Westminster to local authorities. And local authorities at the moment in Scotland are in their knees. Thanks.
That's okay. I'm just looking down the chat, and I've just come across a question from Carolyn Richardson. So, what do the panel think of a universal basic income, but not necessarily Guy Standing's model? Any takers for that one? Go on, Fran.
Firstly, Caroline, thank you very much for that question. It's good to have you on the call. Yes, I very much like the idea of a universal basic income providing it has the right additions in terms of disability premiums. We're already in a situation where people currently, if they move from ESA onto universal credit, because say they have the misfortune to need to move home, they are losing something like £200 a month from their benefits. And clearly that is totally unacceptable in what is supposed to be a universal benefit system. So if we have a universal basic income, it has to properly have the right funding to ensure that disabled people do get all their needs met. And this is not just about social care needs, it's about needs to actually get out there and access the community, go to work if we want to do so, and actually do the things that other people very often take for granted, which we can't do because we don't have the support to do them. So yes, with provisos is my answer.
Right, Joe?
It's going to be one of those nights, isn't it, where everyone goes, yeah, I agree with that.
Well, I don't want you fighting. I want all your options, because from each of your, where you are, has sort of like different avenues, but you actually stand together. So you could all sort of like move forward, sort of like in a wider area, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, no, I believe it, that obviously we need to obviously ensure that obviously disabled people are brought out of poverty, the poverty level. That's pretty much what we're having it right now. And actually that the whole community, when I mean the community of disabled, I mean also the carers surrounding them as well need to also be brought out of that poverty level too. And we need to ensure that everyone surrounding disability is brought up equally, that they can actually live a life, wants to have a life. And like I would call it universal living income, to be honest. I think it'd be the best way of calling it. I want that to happen. And yeah, no, I think having those certain provisos that Fran said, I think would make a huge difference in disabled people's lives. And I think it would make be the way that I would want to see the universal income be brought forward.
Right, well, I don't have any more questions. And
yes, Teresa, it's Philip speaking.
Oh, hello, Philip.
I'm struggling with this Samsung handheld device. My son's bought me a laptop, but I'm still learning how to use it. I am trying very hard to learn this modern communications. I've got my laptop and he's teaching me how to use it, Teresa. But at the moment, I'm having to rely on my Samsung device. What I would like to ask you before we run out of time, or suggestions before we run out of time, when I was a school governor, whenever we discussed children with disabilities, for the special needs as it was euphemistically called, there was no interest, no money. They were at the back of the agenda, forgotten. When I worked in the engineering industry, anybody who had an accident that made his job difficult, they got rid of him. And the current government, they got rid of the Remploy factories, which employed disabled people. In fact, my next door neighbour, he worked at Remploy. He has, I think he got some crippling disease that's hidden. I forgot what it is now. It's some psychological disease that he can't, he has to take injections for it. And when the Remploy factory closed in York, he hadn't got a job. And regarding the benefit system, your PIP, personal independence plans, they are iniquitous, the personal independence plans. Now there's other benefits. There's a carers allowance, disability grants, disability living allowance, adaptations to your homes. There's a whole range of schemes which is almost impossible to access. I'll give you an example and I'll finish my points, Teresa.
Okay.
A friend of mine who lived locally, he was 62, he had a brain tumor and he was declared fit for work. Now when my son Glenn, I asked my son Glenn to go and have a word with him, which he did, and he filled in the PIP forms for him, and then Mel sadly died recently. and he finished up from getting nothing to getting £23,000 a year. And as I said, the PIP people, work and pensions, he was declared fit for work. And I think it's absolutely disgusting. And all the people I've listened to on this call, my heart goes out to them. It really does. But the only solution is a political solution or care cooperatives. And I'll finish on them points, Teresa, because time's running out. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Philip. How do you feel about that, Fran, that the way forward is the cooperative care solution?
I'm not quite sure that I understand what a cooperative care solution is. One of the things that I have been looking at with quite a number of different other organisations under the banner of ROFA is actually having a national independent living service, which would enable people, I mean, that would be totally separated out from the current social care service. It would be, as in it is done in in some councils, it would be run by disabled people for disabled people. Hammersmith Council is actually now doing this. They've been pioneering it for the last couple of years. And their scheme is that they have disabled people running it, making the decisions. And when people apply for care, they're assessed for that care. But after that, they can choose whether they want to have care from a care agency or whether they want to employ the carers themselves. Now, even if you want to choose and employ your own carers, you don't have to become an employer. There is a system in there whereby you can also go to an agency and get the agency to deal with all the paperwork and dealing with the tax people and all of the legal side of being an employer, so that you can still choose who you want to deliver your care, but don't necessarily, as I say, have to be an employer. Or you could, if you want to, choose to be that employer, and some people do, and they want that to continue. But for me, the heart of any care service for disabled people has to have disabled people at the heart of it and running it, which is why we are going to have a government department for disabled people, and you know that government department has to have civil servants and consultants who are all disabled.
Right, well, I'm going to leave you there for a moment because we have somebody, Simon, is it Lydiard, would like to ask a question. Simon?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. You've got beautiful blue eyes.
Yeah, thank you. I don't often get that. Yeah, it's Simon Lydiard. And I'm also, given what you've just said, interestingly, I am a former senior civil servant and currently a self-employed consultant, although I haven't managed to get any work since February. But one of the points I think, well, first of all, can I say all of the speakers I think have brought really good, interesting personal perspectives and specific insights. So it's been fascinating. But I mean, I've got a physical disability, which was acquired through a work-related accident 10 years ago and caused me eventually to need to retire. But I've also got a number of hidden disabilities, which I've had all of my life. And I kind of started thinking when Joe was speaking, and then it got picked up by other speakers, this issue of disbelief, of not being believed when you say you have particular issues you need to deal with. And my experience, and I think, again, it may be a little bit similar to Joe's, is that I actually had kind of independent reports written proving the adjustments, the so-called reasonable adjustments I needed to have made. And then I sometimes face the experience of managers, line managers, saying to me, well, I don't really believe that. And no, I'm not going to do that. And this happened for me right from joining the civil service at the most junior grade. And then in my last 8 years in the civil service as a senior civil servant. So even at the top of the civil service, I still had that disbelief when I had independent evidence to prove that I needed reasonable adjustments. So I think my question, maybe my point, is that do we need more legislation? Do we need amended legislation to give greater legal force to reasonable adjustments so that they can't just keep on being questioned or undermined or disbelieved by employers? Thanks.
Thank you. Robert, would you like to answer that or give your opinion?
Definitely, reasonable adjustments have been useful since they were introduced, but you're absolutely right, they're not nearly strong enough, and maybe that's a good point. Maybe we do need extra legislation to make sure that they're carried out, and a lot of people don't realise the full extent of reasonable adjustment. Reasonable adjustment could mean that people actually need time off their work at times, but that's very seldom used, or even extra days off. That sometimes that is a reasonable adjustment, but unfortunately a lot of employers don't see that. Thank you.
Joe, have you got anything to add to that?
Well, yes, I think that we do need to add more legislation to actually increase that aspect. And I think, as you're quite right, there was I think it's quite common in the workplace for them to question disabled people about their disabilities, and they just don't. I think the education side of it for the managers and things, they just don't understand disability and how it affects people, and I think that also is a bit of a societal issue as well. And I think that a lot of people will actually potentially not talk to a disabled person. They will physically cross a road and not talk to a disabled person because they don't know how to. So how are they meant to be managing them in a work setting if they don't know how to actually deal with them on an everyday basis? And I guess I think that more legislation does need to be brought in to actually protect disabled people in work. And yeah, and I think that where was my other point on this? Because there was another point that I have. I'll come back to it if I remember it. I need to write it down. I will come back to it. But go to another speaker. If I come back to it, I'll tell you, Teresa.
Right. Well, we've had in our first session, we've had just over an hour. And so I would like to thank our speakers, and I would like to thank those people who gave us some really interesting questions. And I need to hand you back over to our co-chair, Ben, and I can't see him, so I'm hoping.
Hello.
Hello.
I am still here. Thank you to all those who have spoken and all those who've attended. I hope you found it incredibly useful and interesting, on the personal experiences of all our participants, on the social model and the human rights model of disability, of course, on cooperatives and the difference that they can make, and of course on the independent living service. So the purpose of this second half of the discussion is to introduce yourselves as members of the Disability Network. Obviously, Teresa and Joe are members of the Disability Network Steering Group. I know there are other members of that steering group on the call as well. So it's very much a free-flowing discussion, perhaps reflecting on what you've heard so far, but also on what the network should be prioritising over the next, I think our term, the steering committee's term is 2 years. So I suppose I'm going to ask, raise your digital hands, try and catch my attention. I'm going to move on to gallery view and see if anyone is. I can see your hand, Fran, but if there is anyone else, I'm going to bring in someone else before then, because obviously you have spoken. That said, I can't see anyone waving, so Fran, go on.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back on the issue of reasonable adjustments. I was on a different panel last weekend talking about this very subject. And yeah, I agree, we do need to strengthen legislation. But one of the things the other panel I was on came up with the idea of was, in fact, to change the name and say that they need to be called necessary adjustments, not just reasonable ones. Because a reasonable one is something, you know, what's reasonable to one person can seem very unreasonable to somebody else. So if we call them necessary adjustments, that might actually give that wording might actually strengthen exactly what we mean by needing those reasonable adjustments, that they are actually completely necessary for disabled people to do their jobs. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you, Fran. I saw that Wendy Smith has raised her hand, so Wendy, the floor is yours, virtually. You are on mute, Wendy, sorry.
Thank you to all the speakers. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm wearing several hats on this one. First of all, I'm a Labour and Co-operative Party candidate in Peterborough for the elections in May 2021. I also have a very deep interest in the subjects that are being discussed tonight on a personal level. I do have a grandson who's autistic. He's also a very artistic young man, as so often autistic people are. It's been quite a journey though. My question, you may realise earlier, was about the mountains that you have to climb. And believe you me, you do have to climb them. Starting, you know, with education, because some had health problems which were real disabilities, in the way that he got treated in the school setting. His job often when he got to school was to have a brush put into his hand and to spend a large part of the day sweeping the tarmac outside. This was like being in Victorian England again, and it also meant that he was socially excluded from mixing with other children. One of the other difficulties, of course, in the state system of education, I'm going back 15 years now, it may have improved during that amount of time, I certainly hope it has, but you can't put autistic children very easily into a setting where a teacher has 30 children to look after. It was quite a battle fighting to get a suitable school for my grandson. And I will unashamedly say to you that what I basically did in the end was to tell people from the Education Authority that if a suitable school wasn't found for my grandson, that I would put his case on the front page of the local newspaper. That worked wonders. But even then, they were sort of dragging their feet, and we need to get in the full extent of all of his medical problems before we can decide what we're going to do, despite the promises they were making. And when you have a NHS which has been underfunded for many, many years, and you find that you're waiting to see a consultant and the waiting list is 2 years, if your education has got to be disrupted whilst you're waiting to shuffle up the top of the queue, which was going to be another 21 months to wait actually in this case, what I didn't basically realise was that it's because the education department were hoping that they would touch up the NHS to pay part of the cost of finding a suitable school for my grandson. So everything in this world, as we all well know, I'm sure there won't be anybody this evening who will disagree, everything comes back to money. Sam went on eventually, after a long battle, to a very good school, could not fault it at all. He was a boarder, and he was able to stay there until he was 16 years of age. Then he moved to a college, which I have to give complete 100% praise for. It was so very, very good. It brought out all of his artistic abilities, and it helped to turn him into, you know, an individual and much more confident. It was really amazing. Sadly, what we don't do in this country is to have a joined up approach. So we get young people, in his particular case, it was learning glass blowing and glass engraving. And he was extremely talented at it. What we don't do, we don't have a joined up approach. There were businesses there on the site of the college, and I felt that if the government could have given those businesses funding, so that when the young people had spent their 3 years of learning these skills, that they could have been given an apprenticeship to continue to use those skills instead of them just absolutely becoming dormant, because that is basically what happens. So I think there's an awful lot more that could be done. I also think there are some difficulties in the social care aspect. And I do believe that what has happened since the days of Mrs. Thatcher's rule is that lots of money has gone from the public sector into the private sector. I'm not altogether sure that this is really working. I think my grandson is in supported living now, and whilst we're very, very grateful for the fact that he is, again, there's lots of training that actually needs to be given to staff. If you're going to look after people with hidden disabilities, of which he has several, then those staff do need to be trained to know how to deal with it, how to help that person, how to encourage them, and how to give quality to their life. So I've gone a long way on this journey with my grandson, but not just for him, for many, many others. There's a long way to go. Dealing with people like the Department of Work and Pensions for PIP, they have staff that really are not trained to the standard that they should be trained to. They don't even understand some of the medical conditions that the public have. It's absolutely essential that we have people who are experienced and knowledgeable and being able to help people who are in much need of help and support. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing the story of your grandson. We really appreciate it. And there's a lot that what you say really just chime with my story, and I'm sure many stories. Joe, I see Joe Watkinson has raised your hand. Did you think of the point that you wanted to make, and you want to make it now?
Well, I was just going to say I totally agree with Wendy, and obviously I think that there's a lot of cliffs that disabled young people are falling off, and that obviously I know that my brother has a number of times fallen off so many cliffs in the sense of the transitional social care from child to adult care. Was a total like it was child care, social care for us was brilliant, but adult social care went terribly. And I think that but around the same time as well, he fell off the cliff for the NHS, for his treatment in the NHS. And I think it happens quite regularly. And I think more we start actually saying this to people, and actually with people in power and positions of power, we can hopefully get them to listen to us. And I think part of that is about we need to have disabled people in positions of power as well. And I think that needs to be an issue as well. It needs to be a thing that we sort out. And I think the co-op obviously has this disability forum, but I think we need to be saying to everyone, even the Labour Party and the unions, that we need to have disabled representation at all levels of our party representing us. And it needs to be sooner rather than later. We're 25 years on from the Discrimination Act, and look at where we are. We're really no further on. And I think that is we are slightly better off, but I think there's still an awful lot of issues that need to be addressed. And I think, obviously, I'm just trying to raise some discussion so people can actually talk about this. So I'm going to leave it there. So I just want everyone to raise that there.
Thank you, Joe. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? You can either raise your digital hand or wave. Teresa? I can see you, Teresa. Go on.
Just to come back or go forward, depends which way you want to look at it. The Co-operative Party actually did quite a bit, and I think we wrote a talking care policy booklet, which should be on the website or was on the website, and it's about cooperative care and the interactions with the carers and the fact that those that are looking after you and everything have how can we say it, interested parties in the care that they give and the care that is given and accepted. It is well worth going and having a look. But I agree with everything our speakers have said and the questions that have been asked tonight, and we do need to move forward politically and get the motions out about disability and how we are actually invisible. And I mean, before I go, just one example. Somebody rang me the other day and offered me a job of a lifetime, which at 65 was wonderful. It meant that I could go back to school and I could go back and teach. And I had to say, I'm sorry, I can't, because I walk with a stick. And they went, health and safety. And I can't walk up the stairs. Schools, the majority of schools don't have lifts. So that would reduce me to the ground floor. But because I wouldn't be a permanent teacher, I had to move from classroom to classroom. So again, I would be a health and safety risk to children in the hallway. I wouldn't be able to do playground duty. So I was most annoyed, but absolutely very chest swollen for the fact that they actually thought I could do their job. So thank you. And thank you very much to everybody, our audience and our speakers. And thanks, Ben, for chairing. And
thank you, Teresa, for chairing, of course, the earlier session. And shocking news, I'm sorry to hear about that. I should actually just say that some people have posted the social care thing that Teresa was talking to in the chat. So there is a link that if you're interested, you can go and find out more information about that. I've seen that Robert has put his hand up. Perhaps actually, in addition to what you want to say, could you perhaps reflect on what Wendy said around this joined up approach on apprenticeship, particularly because I know Community had done work with Remploy before obviously it was cut by the government and largely disappeared. So if you could reflect on that as well, I'm sure people would really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, that's exactly the kind of thing I was wanting to speak to you about. I'd actually earlier on when I was speaking, I'd mentioned that employment is, I feel, is one of the biggest issues for people with disabilities, because with employment brings up it brings a whole new life to people. People can then raise their families and have a reasonable life. And I was lucky enough to work in a supported business. It was a supported business in Glasgow. It had been there since 1804. And I was one of the first in the workforce. I can promise you. A lot of people think that that's not true right enough, but I wasn't. But in 1974, it was run by Strathclyde Regional Council, and it was a social work department, which was totally the wrong place for it to be. And when the regions broke up in 1997, Blyncraft was losing, at a turnover of £3 million, it was losing £1 million a year. We were then taken over by Glasgow City Council and the Direct Labour Organisation, which subsequently became an LLP and it's called City Building. It's the construction wing of Glasgow City Council. And within Blyncraft today, at that time in 1974, when we were losing £1 million a year, we employed 82 people. Today, we employ 360 people, of which 180 have disabilities. We pay well above the living wage, and it's real jobs. We make timber kit frames for houses. We make kitchens. At one time, we were making 200 kitchens a week for the Glasgow Housing Association, and each kitchen has 11 units in it. We furnish all the homeless persons accommodation in Glasgow, which is huge. We have, at one time, we had 10 teams of 3 going out every day furnishing houses. And we make everything that goes into the house. We make the beds, we make the chest of drawers, the wardrobes, the 3-piece suites, the cushion covers, the bedding. Every single thing is made within our SBI. And I know even to this day, there's a lot of people with disabilities don't like supported businesses for many reasons. And I've heard many people saying they're ghettos. But I can assure you, the model in Glasgow, there's nothing like it in the whole of Europe. And I really believe that this should be rolled out throughout Britain. And I've believed that for many, many years now. And as I said before, in 1974, we had a turnover of £3 million and losing £1 million. Today, we have a turnover of £29 million a year, and we make a profit. I can't talk about it highly enough. And anyone who's in Glasgow, for any reason at all, if you get in touch with me, I'll give you a tour. It's an amazing place. And it's totally integrated within City Building itself, employed 2,300 people. And if you ask anybody who works in Blyncraft where they work, they say they work with City Building. And they feel totally integrated among the workforce. And I really believe that's the way forward. Thanks.
That is great.
Fantastic. Thank you, Robert. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Yeah, I can see one person. This is quite unhelpful. This is going to be quite difficult. I can see you putting your hand up, but your name isn't on the screen for me. You have a picture behind you. I think you just unmuted yourself. So hello, what's your name?
Oh, hi, my name's Anna. I've only just joined the co-op party, and I just wanted to say how I've really enjoyed this evening. I'm doing a disability MA, so I've really enjoyed the idea of Fran's human rights model of disability. I'm also involved in politics, and I so agree with Robert about how you're a lone voice and how it seems to be disability at the bottom of the list. So that's why I've so enjoyed tonight, that you're with like-minded people. I can empathise with Wendy because I've had the same issues with my children. And for example, my son is currently doing a vocational course, which he loves, but he can't do an apprenticeship because you have to have GCSE English, which is ridiculous because he can practically do the work, he just can't get English. So it's what you were saying as well about all these dormant young people that aren't getting opportunities, and it's so sad that they're spending a lot of times just on their computers at home where they can't interact very well with people, and then you get more and more insular, if you know what I mean. So that's all I wanted to say, really.
Thank you, Emma, and welcome to the Cooperative Party. I'm glad you've enjoyed this evening, and I hope that you will be an active member, and we'll see you at many of these events in the future. I'm glad we haven't put you off, which is always a worry with these kind of events. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Raise your hand either digitally or physically, if you can. I'm just wondering, there is oh, hold on, 2 people exactly the same time. Sean, do you want to speak?
Hello.
Hello.
See if I get my video working. Can everyone see me?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm quite new to this, to be honest, to this party anyway, but I've been a supporter of Labour, not an official supporter, but I've always voted for them. I never voted for the Tories. But what's quite clear to me, I feel, is particularly this year after the Tories got re-elected, was that the government doesn't care about people like me. I have autism, I've been diagnosed with bipolar, I've been diagnosed with schizophrenia, I get diagnosed with all different things all the time. But in the end, I've just settled that I'm me and try to get through things. But what particularly appealed to me about cooperatives, and I've been interested in the idea for a long time, because I remember having an interview with John Lewis as a graduate, and it was the idea of it took the positives of the businesses, but also being democratic and the employees and the customers being involved. And in politics today, there seems to be people going more left, whether it's in America or the UK or other countries, more to the left, more to the right. And I'm still, I wouldn't say I'm centre left, but I still feel a disconnection from both sides. And like I said, like getting back to my original point, where I feel the government doesn't care about us, and unless there's another election, we're not going to be another 5 years. They're not going to care about us for another 5 years. So what can I do about that? So my idea is to set up a business and try to help myself through a community interest company, that kind of thing. And I find, particularly on the left, we're always pointing to the government, and the people on the right are always pointing to business. And we've got to all get along somehow. And what I also see is that we don't have to always just vote for a party to get change. We as individuals can do things. And the world is a lot more multipolar. In the 80s, it was the Cold War, East v West. Now it's multipolar even now, not just by different nation states, but by technology, and then who controls the technology, and from the areas of class, wealth, and the control of money. For example, wealthy people can borrow money at very low interest rates because the currency is manipulated by the central banks. And we don't have to participate in that now. There's digital solutions for that people don't understand, but they will, because eventually, if you really Google around central banks, the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve, the Chinese central bank, they're all coming up with digital currencies. And you don't need banks anymore if a central bank wants digital currency. And that's going to totally change the world as well. And you can do all those kind of things and get involved in that kind of thing through cooperative structures that cooperatives are looking at, with cooperatives having their own digital currencies. Just like you may have heard in local areas, they have their own currencies, but it's paper, but you can print that. But with a digital currency, if it's distributed, it's cryptographic. There's so many technology solutions that people in the left can use to change the world without voting a government. You don't need a government voted in to change it. And that's not to say I'm anti-government, but I think we do all need to change our mindset. And this is why I call my company Dev Mindset, because we need a mindset of thinking, not just about people with disabilities and what they can do. I work great at home, quiet, no people talking, no politics with people. I can just learn, read, and do what I want to do. But that's not been acceptable. But now I see a big opportunity, because now we all want to work from home, and I work well at home. And that's where I see an opportunity in COVID, which has been terrible, but it's also a good opportunity for someone like me, because many employers were against that. Now there could be blended working. And so I suppose that's where I just want to voice my frustration a bit, because I don't feel there's many places of where my thinking where that belongs. Maybe it's a bit too far in the future, but this traditional idea, government is the solution. It's part of the solution, but we can still do things ourselves and to change or put pressure on the government, not just with protests, which we can't do at the moment, or just only positions, which are being increasingly ignored. And I suppose, yeah, I'll finish there. Thanks.
Thank you, Sean. I should say this is perhaps slightly jarring with your message of perhaps not government, but there are local elections next year, and as Robert indicated, local government, there's also the Scottish Parliament, there's the Welsh Senate, there's a London mayoralty election. These are really important set of elections next year, which will be incredibly influential over how our communities work for disabled people. I've seen that Jane has put her hand up, so Jane, the floor is yours.
Yes, I mean, mine is much more basic, coming back down to employment and the current situation we're in with COVID. As Sean just touched on there, a lot of people are working from home. For some people, it's really, really good, which is great. But I just wondered whether anybody knew of any monitoring or any research that's being done into whether organisations are actually equipping people who are now working from home and likely to be working from home for the foreseeable as to, you know, and again, something that Joe touched on, equipping him with equipment in his office. Are they actually doing it for you at home? Because at the end of the day, I had a special chair at work. Now I'm working at home. I can't afford a special chair, for example. Joe touched on some of the stuff that made it easier for him to work from in his office. But is this actually happening for people working from home? Now, one of my organisations I work for, we're definitely working from home till April, and we're potentially working from home forever. And I just wonder if that's going to create some barriers and challenges to people getting the equipment they need.
Thank you, Jane. I know that I think Unison did a campaign on this middle of summer around the adjustments fund, because it didn't originally cover working from home. It only covered working in an office or working in a workplace. I believe the government, after significant pressure, changed the rule, but I don't know if there's been any research. I can see that Joe, were you waving, Joe, or were you cleaning something off your screen?
I was going to come on. I was going to add a point. Going, great. How do people feel about this? Obviously, COVID has obviously allowed everyone to work from home, which has obviously been something that disabled people have been fighting for years, to be able to try and work from home, to allow them to work at home, and to actually help with their management of their own conditions. Do people think that this is going to carry on after COVID, or do you think we're going to go back to the old normal where we don't get those same kind of rights? Because I know as I said, I lost my job in the December 3 months prior to COVID, and I asked if I could work from home, and they said no. 3 months later, they allowed every member of my staff in my work to work from home. So obviously things could have been done, but weren't done. And obviously, what are people's general feelings? Do we think we're going to go back, or do we think we're going to stay as we are, or potentially this is going to be something that we're able to fight for? I would obviously bring that as a general discussion.
Is there anyone who wishes to feed back on that? Robert?
I feel that definitely there will be a large number of employers who will have seen the benefits, the workforce working from home, and I'm convinced that it will continue. I know that one of my colleagues from Unite, she's on the General Council of STUC, and she's involved with the banking industry, and she was saying that her members are already saying to her, when this is finished, we're not going back into the office to work, we're wanting to work from home. So I absolutely think it will continue for many, many businesses.
Thanks, Robert. And I suppose adding on to that, don't worry, I can see you, Teresa. Adding on to that, it's important that when we make decisions over who's working from home, it's done in the interest of the workers, not in the interest of the business wanting to save money, which I fear that that's going to be the overriding priority of businesses rather than what works best for the workers. Teresa? You're on mute, Teresa.
It's unlike me to be shut down talking. There was a little bit on Look North last night and tonight about our younger people in Hull and the Humber area, where our school children can't afford broadband and internet, and they're not having sort of like the access to technology. I mean, I know when I was at school, I didn't even know what a computer was. I knew what a typewriter was, and I left it. But now we need the technology, we need the internet, the broadband, the iPads, the laptops, and Hull's not the only place that's deprived, but it's like someone somewhere has got to decide whether, if we're home working, then you're actually stopping the majority of people working from home because they don't have the facilities. And is your employer going to give you the internet, the laptop, the chair, the telephone system that you are going to need because you're going to be in an office? I mean, I'm lucky. I look around, I've got the printer, I've got a desktop, I've got a laptop, I've got iPad, I've got a smartphone. But I can't work because I'm disabled, which is a frustration. And so you've either got it or you haven't got it. But it's like, you know, we seem to be shouting, and again, nobody's listening. So are we invisible?
Thank you, Teresa. I'm just looking at the chat to see if there are any points that could potentially be raised. There's things about, you know, we need to see disability as a general minority right, which would be raising affording additional protection. There's things about stronger discrimination laws, because through law change and protection can be brought about. There's various things. I would direct you to the chat if you can have a look. I can see that Barry has his hand up. If you want to speak now. I'm on mute, Barry. If you could just unmute yourself, that would be great. Thank you very much.
That's better, isn't it? A couple of small points.
Yeah, okay.
I've got some observations, and following on from the last contribution, one of the big things I do is every day I run a newsletter on COVID with some friends out of the World Health Organization, and we send it around in a big network. But inside that, what's interesting is watching what's going on with all of the massive policy changes that will change in life. Now, one or two of them can actually be turned on disabled with some chronic conditions. But one or two of the things that we do, and we're able to do if we're able to use things like the Zoom side of things, is there is a massive amount of work going on with virtual classrooms, and the ability, not for necessarily just for kids and the youngsters to use that as a way of learning, but actually for teaching people how to do it. Now, one big thing that will be impressed upon us as people with disabilities is that fact of being isolated, which a number of contributors tonight have made the point of. The isolation is turning massively into mental health in those people who are not anywhere near being used to working on their own, in their own home, etc. And I think that I've seen already a number of training schemes that have come up. And my belief with that is that there is a strong ability for people with disabilities of different sorts, not all of the disabilities, obviously, but people with different sorts to take on that potential of employment. And it will be employment. It's a new world that we're going to have to live with, which is virtual in broad terms. But the opportunities for that are different to what they were when people were expected to go to work. Nearly 60% of people are unlikely to go back into an office space. That means that work is going to be done in a very different manner. And I think all that's being described now, including teaching and teachers, and I work with a couple of schools at the moment locally. I've got community interest there. And I can tell you that they're making clear that they need the skill of someone able to be able to get over the messages using virtual capacity. So I think there are some things in place that are going to come out of this COVID disaster that could actually be very strong and powerful economically and also in terms of employment. That's my bit.
Thank you, Barry. That's really, really interesting. I think I heard Miriam say something before we went to Barry. Miriam, do you want to speak? Miriam, are you there? If you are there and you are speaking, you are on mute. No. Okay. Is there Miriam may be speaking shortly. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? I would recommend so Caroline Richardson, who's on the call, has just made a very interesting point around benefits and volunteering in the chat. I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, Caroline, but if you want to speak now in front and add to what you put in the chat, you're more than welcome, but please don't feel obliged to.
No, that's fine. I used to be one of the authors, or still probably am one of the authors of the Spartacus Network. We sort of came to fame with the Responsible Reform Report and wrote quite a considerable number of reports after that. And one of them was Beyond the Barriers, which was talking about ESA and how inappropriate the criteria were, and therefore the assessments were for whether you can work or not. And my idea was that we should reward activity. And one of the activities we should reward, amongst others, would be playing sport, for instance, because a lot of people who are disabled feel that they can't or feel that they can't afford to. So if you took up a sport, then you would have an extra additional top up on your benefits. And the same would be for volunteering, because for a lot of people, the step into work always seems so binary that you're either not working or you are working. That's not strictly true, because under ESA, you can work and earn up to £140 a week. However, in the RAG group, that's limited to a year. It's not really sufficient. Some people will only ever work part-time, and some people will only work very, very small amount of hours. And that has to be recognised, and it literally doesn't get recognised. And I think it's really unfair. And I think things like steps back into work, where the government is punitive and sets out work programmes that if you can't attend or you can't complete, then you'll get sanctioned for. And this is the exact opposite idea, that instead of hitting people with a stick, we reward them with a carrot. So things like volunteering, which again, with things like UBI and things like that, these are things that are giving back to communities, that encourage community activity, that encourage local activity and local use of facilities. If people have sports clubs, I've been ironically a member of an adult gymnastics club, and because I'm older and disabled and completely awful at gymnastics, but I could play around in a soft play area, which was fantastic for my mental health. They could then apply for additional funding. I was also in a shooting club, and again, they could apply for additional funding. What I couldn't get was any affordable help. So if someone was driving me to these places and waiting while I did it, it was costing me £40. And unfortunately, the money just isn't there in DLA or PIP to afford to do these things. So we are limiting our own society, we are limiting the opportunities for disabled people, and we are not rewarding positive behavioural traits. We're actually saying to people, stay at home, don't do anything, because if you do anything, we'll punish you for it. And that's a really negative place for the whole of our society, but especially for our community.
Thank you, Caroline. That really chimes actually with my my working experience. So I occasionally do focus groups, and I did one with a group of disabled people, and as part of working as a focus group, you get a monetary incentive, and the sheer fear of these participants that when they received the money, there would be someone from the government basically watching, or would know that they participated in this focus group and therefore would sanction them. Now, this is a focus group that was 2 hours work. It was hardly going to make it, most people could do it, and it would not make a difference to whether or not they can work. And it baffles me that we try and get people to work, but then even if we get them on the sort of staging posts where they feel ready to get into work, we then punish them. So thank you, Caroline. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment, ask a question? Yes, please do. Sorry, again, your name's not on my screen, so.
I know. My name is Jagir Sekon. I'm from Greenwich Borough. I've heard quite a few speakers. I think 2 points I want to make is, this is very important workshop. Actually, we must keep it going. The reason why I'm saying is we can only combat the barriers for disabled people if we keep the momentum going and comply with the regulation of the government, plus our own initiatives. I heard someone from Glasgow saying they have employed so many people. That makes me very proud. Maybe we should, a couple of people, visit that place and see what they have done better, but we cannot do. And sometimes that does help to know what they have done. And it's quite important. It's moving. I have to say, when I look back, when I had responsibility for disability in our borough, things were moving, but they're moving slow. Now, because of COVID, the people are working from home. It is becoming very heavy. And employer will say, oh, we can't do this for you. It is their duty. It's part of their duty to do what is required for a disabled person to make him able to work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, I really appreciate that. I think it would actually be interesting, Robert, if you were able to share information around that business with the network, and therefore we can send information to our members so that they would be interested, if that was something you could potentially do.
No, I would be absolutely delighted to do that. And as I said earlier on, I can't speak highly enough of the place. And one of the things that they did do with the workforce was that every worker, whether they were disabled or able-bodied, could take 75 minutes out their week to attend their learning centre and do some sort of studying. And they've done all sorts of stuff. They've done like the ECDL, but they've done sign language, they've done guitar lessons, photography, local history. It's an absolutely amazing place. And the management initially kicked back and says, no, this will not work, that production will go down. But they found out very quickly that production actually went up. It's a fantastic facility, great place to work.
Thank you, Robert. Is there anyone else? I'm conscious of the time. We've obviously been on the call for a fair while. Is there anyone who would like to make a comment or a question? Please raise your hands if you can, either physically or digitally. I am seeing no one. I'm just going to see if I can bring Miriam. Is Miriam? Oh, Caroline, were you waving your hand? Hello, Caroline. Again, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just going back to the UBI, I am working on a universal basic income. I have put a link, I don't know if it'll work, into the chat. And I do want to have a bigger discussion, because within that UBI lab, we really need people to be engaged and to feedback and to support the idea. And we need more ideas, and we need critique of our ideas, and we need people who think round corners and people who think in straight lines. But we need more people, because otherwise I sort of feel like I'm carrying a lot of this on my own, and therefore it will just all be my fault if it goes wrong. But it would be lovely, because we got there seemed to be quite a positive response from a lot of people, and some queries and questions. So I don't know whether people will be interested in learning more about it, or joining me, or joining the lab, or us even having a session on it, where we talk about it. Because I know where I've been in cooperative meetings before, I've asked a question and it's been positive there as well. So it seems to be something that people want to discuss and think about. So if people are interested, do you think we could facilitate that in some way?
Actually, that kind of brings me on to my closing point. So if there is no one else who wishes to speak, which I am going to say, oh, Philip, but don't worry, Caroline, I'll come on to and answer that point in a second. Philip, the floor is yours. You're on mute, I'm afraid. There you are, you're not on mute.
I'll only be a minute, as we're closing now after nearly 2 hours. I'd like to say that the Cooperative Council networks, and as we've been said earlier, next year's elections for various public bodies, may I suggest that Labour and cooperative candidates, they impress upon sitting councillors and local government that they appoint a disabilities officer to deal with these issues we've all discussed tonight, particularly with children and, well, everybody, every individual, man, woman or child who's got a disability, whether it's visible or invisible. That, in my view, is local councils, they don't have to employ anybody extra, just give someone that responsibility to deal with all the benefit minefield and see that people are treated fairly. Because we all know the current government are not going to lift a finger for people like us.
Thank you, Philip. Absolutely, that is something for all of you to take away. Don't take it as homework, but just as a suggestion. I am going to, I think that is everybody. Yep. Okay. Well, thank you very much for attending this session. To answer Caroline's, to provide some answer to Caroline's question, we're going to be sending out a newsletter following this event in the next couple of weeks. So if there's anything that perhaps you would want to raise with the steering group and the network, our email is on the website. Unfortunately, I can't remember what it is, so I can't read it out to you. But please do, Caroline and anyone else, send anything that you think our members would be interested in. We're also planning on holding other events over the course of the next year or so, and the steering group will be deciding the topics of those. So again, if there's anything that you think we should be talking about events-wise, please do send them into that email. And also, of course, anything that we should be focusing on in any of our other work. We won't just be holding events, we'll be considering policy, etc. So all that is left for me to do, I think, is to thank our speakers and of course Teresa for chairing. So thank you, Joe, thank you, Robert, and thank you, Fran, particularly for sticking around because you didn't necessarily have to. And also thank you to the Cooperative Party staff, in particular Izzy, for facilitating this discussion. We really appreciate all the hard work you do day in, day out for this party and for progressive politics. And I suppose the only thing that is left for me to say is, well, since it's December, have a wonderful festive time, or as wonderful that you can in the middle of the pandemic. And I hope to see you all at a future event, whenever that may be. It will probably be digital, though, I'm afraid. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.